Welcome to my podcast called Shaping Your Journey. You're listening in on conversations with my friends, some great artists, some great drummers, people of the music world, and specialists in our music community. Today I have the honor of having Walfredo Reyes Jr. join us and talk a little bit about shaping your journey. Walfredo, thanks again for joining us. Before we talk about those decisions, what makes us who we are today, and those decisions that we took along our trajectory. Who were the people that affected our being, our decisions? Who were people who opened the doors? Names. It's important. The thought process. What were we thinking? Tell us a little bit about your background for those of you who might not know.
Well, thank you for having me here. A lot of people know that, of course, I come from a long line of musicians from Cuba. So music was in my house all the time. But with that being said, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I saw Dr. Dolittle, and I had my pets, animals, and all that. Meanwhile, I always loved music. My dad was big jazz with his friends. In those days, actually, Alex Acuna was 18 years old in Puerto Rico. And, I used to see him come to the house and the local musicians. But I was still into my animals and stuff like that. So I was exposed to Latin music, jazz. And of course, when my music, that I call my music, the music of my era, started coming into the airwaves, then I was completely enamored with, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Guess Who, all the British invasion, the American bands, Elvis, one by one, 167, 68. By 1969, I was loving the rock and roll music, and, Cream. I bought CTA. That was my first album that I bought with my own money. Disraeli Gears, Abraxas came out, Santana. So I told my dad, I said, man, I think I want to play this music. I want to play rock and roll. And the drums was a vehicle for me to play that music. I didn't start it on drum set because I saw Buddy Rich and that's it. I was not one of those drummers. I wanted to play the music of my time, and the drums would be the vehicle for me to play that music. It was not like I wanted to be a virtuoso soloist. So I started lessons and listening. And then, of course, my dad turned me on to a lot of jazz records. My mom, salsa records in the living room, Cuban music, Los Papines, Gran Combo, Mercedita Valdez, Rolando La Serie, Orquesta Aragon, and then my dad would big band jazz, Charles Lloyd, Miles Davis, the quartets, Thad Jones and Mel Lewis, Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, and then me in my room. And so little by little, I started fusioning. For example, bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer came in the scene, and my dad went, "Wow, that drummer, that's amazing. He's playing odd times." I went, "Really? Okay." And then Chicago, he detected the jazz influence of Danny Serafin and Bobby Colomby, yeah. Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And then many bands that were like that. Yes, for example, Bill Bruford. My dad went, "Do you know what that drummer's doing? That's amazing." So he came to my side and I went to his side and in jazz. And then we moved to Las Vegas, where I was already playing percussion, learning simple percussion parts. I joined a lot of different bands and continue my studies. And then it was a little later that I got into my root music, which is the Cuban percussion and Cuban and Puerto Rican and Caribbean syncopation, Afro-Caribbean music that was so syncopated than the regular 8 notes, 16 notes, quarter notes, kum, kum, ka, kum, 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 ka, and now it was like, and that was closer to funk.
Yeah.
So Cuban music, I related it more to the meters and funky stuff. Now came Stevie Wonder, the Motown, Stax, Ohio Players, like all the funk or Earth, Wind and Fire. And then I realized, wow, this is so, to study these two styles is beneficial to the drummer. And then when you play jazz, also with syncopation, the Latin stuff, it helped because, some things became easier. And it's almost graduating from chef school, and now you can cook easier things better. And so, and then of course, I cannot go on mentioning my dad was my first teacher. Then he put me with a teacher when we arrived in Las Vegas, Leo Camera, which was the percussionist from the Hilton Hotel in Las Vegas, which played for Elvis and Margaret, you name it. And then in those days, Alex Acuna moved to Las Vegas, and he used to set up at my house because at the beginning he was living in an apartment, so he didn't know he couldn't practice. So he set up his fives drum set, and so now we have two drum sets, and so that was a big influence on me. Not only person-on-person lesson, but he will start jamming and playing for an hour, and he will go play congas, and so I would just play congas until my arms fell, and then he will go take a solo. I went like and so so that energy of playing and communicating percussion rhythms one-on-one for hours gave me a big learning knowledge of how to, for example, the concept that was Alex. If you cannot play a soccer game unless you run for 4 hours. I mean, you can't practice 20 minutes and then play 90 minutes. You cannot play a 2-hour show. If you play 4 hours, then a 2-hour show is going to be easier. So that was Alex. Wow. I mean, Alex, basically, we would play until the next day. I could not play because my arms were sore, full of blisters, completely like damaged. And I said, well, that means that I was out of shape. So by the time I went from there to the university to play for my jazz ensemble class, that was a piece of cake. A 2-hour show, piece of cake. And, we've been playing for hours at home. And so, and then a lot of different clinics that I attended, in Las Vegas, Alan Dawson, Billy Cobham, and little by little taking lessons from different people. And then, of course, we're talking about it earlier, the influence. Orestes Vilato gave me a little cassette in 1975 of this band called Los Bamban. And it was the very first album, Uno Solo Fuerte. And then Changuito was playing the rhythm that we know now called the songo. But his concept on the drums not only influenced me, but influenced Alex there. And a lot of people don't know this, but you can ask him yourself. That was a big influence at the time when Palladium, Heavy Weather album came on. Jaco and Manolo and Alex, they were all listening to what was going on that was starting to get out of Cuba. Then Irakere, Enrique Plas. So little by little, I actually communicated with Changuito, and he was sending tapes and videos. And then, of course, later on, early in the 90s, I got to meet him for the first time in Cancun when I went over there with Santana. But that's it, Aldo. The learning that was the starting point. It hasn't ended. I never have arrived.
No, what they say, the day you think you've arrived, that's it. That's it.
You're dead.
So hopefully we never get there. Right? We never arrive.
We'll never will. Yeah, I'm still learning from a lot of young guys, a lot of new talents that are, they see things different because they lived a different era. I love all the drummers that everybody out there knows. You name it, from like Neil Peart to you name it, from all the classic rock drummers, jazz drummers. But then there's a lot of guys, for example, like Tony Allen from Nigeria, and Karim Ziad from Algeria, Paco Seri from Ivory Coast. There's a lot of drummers in Europe, African descent, North African, Arabic, that have India, have different concepts And now we're seeing that in some of the new generation of African and Indian, for example, Sarah, which is from Indian descent, but now she plays the hip hop and the modern stuff with a different flavor and concept.
Right.
So when you arrive from different cultures and everybody meets in one style, you're gonna hear that a little different. And of course, that's exactly what happened to me when like right now, I always turn on a lot of my students to some of these styles that they have never heard before. And even though technically it's a little simpler, as far as strokes, but the syncopation and the concept to them is like so out of this world. And so that's my mission always. Like I've been blessed with a successful career, but just like so many people taught me and continue to teach me and turn me on to things, my mission is to teach and help the younger generation, not even younger generation, because I have some students that are older and they play in church and they play as a hobby. I just want them to love and to get it so they can turn what I taught to them into their own thing. And that's my pleasure as a teacher.
Yeah. No, and it's important. I think one of the greatest joys as we're moving forward, looking around you and seeing how can I turn people onto this, because now you have a much wider view, right? And that's what we've been doing at COSA for years, all along.
Exactly.
Right? Every time that you've come on faculty, you see it, and the mix of styles, the mix of influences. Mark Juliana, for example, was a student at COSA for 2 years. He came to the camps.
No, your COSA camp, I tell you, I forgot which one was the first one, what year, but we still talk about it. I see people, drummers, and I go, oh my God, I met you at COSA. They're all memorable. I mean, it's basically, you actually are writing history, but you don't realize it when you are there. And all the get-togethers with different drummers of different styles, the exchange of information. Yeah. And one of the most beautiful things that I actually did when my dad used to have dinners and used to invite percussionists and drummers. After dinner, we used to sit there. I used to sit there and listen to them talk and tell stories. And that's exactly what you set up at COSA, where aside from the classroom, students and teachers are sitting in a round table talking drum talk. And the information is so valuable. I cannot tell you the amount of information that I have gotten just by sitting there or sitting somewhere watching or listening to two drummers that I admire talk to each other.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that goes far. And also playing, like, for example, at COSA, we always have a rhythm section for the rhythm section labs. And in the evening, we have concerts and everybody's playing. And I remember the one time we had Jimmy Cobb, who was there, right? And the bass player, Francesco Beccaro was the bass player, and Bob Quaranta on piano, guys from New York. And I remember when they were playing that set that night, and I remember them coming afterwards, and they're both like, they're starry-eyed, and they both looked at me and said, Aldo, playing with this guy who was like part of the Blue Note history, Miles Davis. He said, we've never played like that. This is like going to heaven. So they're all thanking me. I said, don't thank me. I said, thank that Jimmy was able to come and he loved the experience. And just that being able to sit at a table, even at lunch, a dinner, concert, after the concert, the hangs, the classes, all the different contexts, but in such a concentrated way where you have no distractions, right? Makes all the difference. Where the only thing that matters is what we're doing like right now, right? And everybody just brings whatever they have to the table. Whether it's you, Alex, Neil Peart when he was at COSA, or anybody who came there, was always the same thing. And I remember
the energy is amazing that develops.
Yeah. And one thing you made me remember, the time that I decided that to invite Changuito, and this is like early on. I mean, we've been doing this for over 25 years. But in the beginning, I said, we have to have the best people here come with us in the mountains and exchange. So I remember this one year, I really went crazy. I said, we have to invite Changuito. That's it. So I went through that whole process. Changuito had to have 2 visas, one for him to come to Canada first, and then the U.S. So it was a double thing, and it had to be lined up. And he was going to be in the States for a while, so I organized for him to do other things within that period. So I had made it long enough so that after Costa, he could go around and go to Berkeley and went to L.A. and a few other things like that, so they could take advantage of it. But before coming, Changuito says to me, I understand Jim Chapin's going to be there. He says, I want to sit with him because he claims to be the independent guy and the jazz guy. And then on the other side, Jim Chapin says, so Changuito's coming this year. I says, yes. He says, make sure I sit with him because he's supposed to be the guy who in this whole Sango thing, and he's inventing all kinds of stuff. I got to sit with him. I said, okay. So Horacio Hernandez was there that year.
Oh my God.
And I said, Horacio, I may need you to, because I'm not always there to translate. So one night, the 3 of them in their suite, wherever they were, the 3 of them, and I wish we had a camera and a microphone to record. It was an all-nighter where they just went on, and Horacio said they just would not stop talking and showing each other things. It was, I mean, I can only imagine that one.
You see that energy, it happens. I don't know how, but it's the same kind of adrenaline that happens when you feel a little sick and you get on the stage in front of a crowd and you sit on the drums and all of a sudden you're Superman and you don't know what happened, but basically you play the show and then afterwards you die. But while you're there, that energy exchange of creative energy really, really does revive you. And knowing those 3 guys, I took my lessons with Jim Chapin when I was still in high school, and he was living in New York City. And because of Jim Chapin, actually, at the time I was playing so much match grip. So I started out playing traditional grip, but I was playing mallets. And then I was playing some salsa orchestras, and it was timbales. And then rock and roll with my match grip. And I finally told Jim Chapin, it's not fair. My left hand is part-time and my right hand is full-time. It's always match grip on my right hand, but the left hand is like a schizophrenic person. It just goes from here to there, from here to there. Can I just play? And Jim Chapin said it. He goes, anything you can do with your left hand, you can do with your right, and vice versa. So you can play match grip, and if you can play jazz with your right hand, you can play like jazz with your left hand and match grip. And I said, okay. So then that's when I switched. A lot of people think of match grip only when they play rock to play louder, and then they go to traditional grip. But as a percussionist, you kind of like play more match grip than, right?
Oh yeah. No, I had that. I went through 1 year of complete torture because I started traditional, and I was watching. I went to see all of these guys in Chicago. You talk about the original band with Danny. I saw them live, blood, sweat, and tears. Like every ELO, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, like everybody I saw, and many of them were playing that way. So this is the way I studied. This is the way I played for a long time. And then I started studying percussion. So I was playing like 8 hours a day of mallets, timpani, multiple percussion, and then drum set this way. And then and snare drum. I said, it's impossible. Going back and forth, I was like really becoming or feeling like a lunatic. So I said, I got to have one way. So I went through that whole discussion of which is better. There's no such thing as better. You decide what works. And then I totally switched to match. And I play only brushes, traditional when I'm doing that.
Me too. Yeah. That's because the brushes, the invention of how it's played was invented with the traditional grip. I'll tell you, and then, it's exactly like you. So when I actually saw Jeff Porcaro, and then I saw Carlos Vega, and then I saw a lot of rock drummers that were like incredible. I think John Guerin even was playing match grip. I'm going, oh, well, I can do it. So that's when I really stopped. But Jim Chapin was a energy.
Yeah.
I mean, his energy was amazing.
Oh, yes.
And I wish I would have just been there, Changuito and Jim Chapin together.
Well, yeah, no, and it's fantastic because at COSA, Jim Chapin was there right to the end for years. He was like full time. He was the guy that was running. Sometimes I had to ask the technicians to make sure he left his room so he can go eat, because he'd get into those discussions either in the room on the way, or he'd go to the bathroom for a minute and then all of a sudden disappear, just because he starts giving a lesson in the bathroom while somebody's asking him a question, and they never get out. So he was something else. I think there should be a golden statue for Chapin.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, we've been through so many great teachers in COSA. For a lot of people that don't, that they can look it up, but it's basically like an incredible educational drummers powwow of so many different kinds. It's not just drumming styles, but percussion, electronics, teaching. So, I really, really loved all my memories on your COSA camp.
Yeah. And then there's another one. I mean, I just remembered you came to Cuba with us with your
Yes.
father, and Alex also was there that same year, right?
Not that year.
Not that
Alex
year? Okay.
canceled for whatever reason.
Oh, right.
Remember, I had to play with the band that Alex was going to play from Norway.
Oh, right,
So I played a concert. Yeah. But then Alex, I think, came the following year.
Right.
That I was not there. And then I came back with my kids, not necessarily to participate in education, because I had my three at that time. They were all in their 20s.
I remember.
So
yes.
I was pretty busy with them. But then we still managed to actually do a little presentation, and they were there. We loved it. And so, yeah, I really wish that I could have been with you in this last one. There's so many new talent in Cuba. It keeps on just keeps on. Cuba. Actually, when I was with my dad there at a friend's house, he said, "I gotta go and help my kid out. He's got an audition tomorrow for university, and he's doing a piano recital." And he played me the tape of the piece. It was like some kind of like Rachmaninoff, or it was just like really difficult piano piece. And I was going, wow. So is he a concert piano? He wants to go to college? No, he wants to be a singer. But in Cuba, you have to have 5 years of piano to enter music school. And I'm going, what? Like, this guy just wants to be a singer? So in other words, if you want to be a triangle player, you still got to go through 5 years of piano. And so that makes it, that sets the bar very high.
Yes, yes.
So when I see, a lot of drummers like Daphne Prieto sitting in the piano, and musicians that are like great drummers, that you said, oh my God, this guy has spent thousands and thousands of hours in their drum set, but they're pianists also.
Yes, yes.
So it's like, wow.
And it's amazing because, even if you look back to Enrique Pla, for example, who I first saw him with Irakere when they first were touring, early 70s, when they first were touring the world. So they came to Montreal and I saw them, and then later on, of course, I met him through our programs, and I see him all the time. And when I was just there, they were recording day and night, and everything they would play would be totally different from the last thing. And there's, all of a sudden he comes back into the room, into this control room, and they're singing all these parts, and he's showing them on the piano. So everybody's interchangeable. Everybody plays everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's about music. What a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you're just, like I said before, like, I always felt that, in a band, you just basically, like in the kitchen, you have ingredients, and in order for the dish to be successful, the song, the piece of music, you got to have the right parts. And only later on, when I started getting into jazz and in college, did I start getting into the different types of soloing, which is, when people say drum solo, it can be many different things. Where like at that time in the 1970s, growing up in Vegas, the disco was popular, and you had that foot on the floor. Well, that matched very parallel with Brazilian music and a lot of Latin music, where the drum solo never interrupts the dancer. So like I remember when they had Tito Puente coming into Las Vegas with his Latin jazz ensemble, there was a dance floor. Now, you never saw a jazz concert with a dance floor unless you're playing big band swing music, but so Latin music, whether you're soloing or not, the beat never stops. And that whole thing of like the groove stops to show off the drummer, that didn't work in my world. For me, it didn't work on the rock, the disco, the dancing, R&B. You give the drummer some and never interrupt the dancer. And so there's a lot of different styles of drumming, and that's why a lot of drummers, for example, like Jeff Porcaro, never liked taking drum solos. I think that's probably the reason why he never wanted to abandon the groove. But there's many different ways. I got into drum solos later, but I'm the one. Funny enough, with Chicago right now, one of the feature tunes of the show is the drum percussion solo. And we try to add those elements of keeping the people bopping their heads, and not necessarily like, okay, everybody, bam, 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 brrr. No, this is not a showcase on my rudiments. That we want to groove you out of your seat, mentally, physically, spiritually, and that's my goal. So that's something that in Latin music, for a lot of drummers that are not into Latin music, that's something that you can learn from. That you can actually, there's a way of soloing. As you know, a lot of the Afro-Cuban clinics are rhythm and dance, drum and dance. They go together. One does not go out without the other. So that concept I've learned in the Latin, whether it's folkloric, Afro-Cuban, Afro-Puerto Rican, salsa, danzón, merengue, you name it. The dancer never is interrupted.
Right. Yeah. And one thing that's interesting is some people have known you as a drummer. Others have known you as a percussionist. I've known you for a long time, so I had the pleasure of watching you in the different contexts. Was there ever a conscious decision that you want to be a percussionist, or you want to be a drummer, or just the wherever you were heading or whatever you happened to be engaged in was what you did?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. It's funny. Like I told you, in Puerto Rico when I was a kid, I started playing percussion for fun, just to play in the neighborhood, go to the beach with some congas, some Puerto Rican panderos, plena, with a guitar, play in church a little bit, and I still didn't even know that I was going to be a musician. I think that percussion was just part of the rhythm and having fun. And then of course, with a couple of kids groups, we would go to the corners and just play Christmas songs and all that. And people gave us money. And that's when I went, whoa, you can make money having fun. And so I continued playing percussion. But when I really, really wanted to actually be a musician, as far as reading music, and I always thought as the drum set as, like the serious, you call out the tempos, it's like you're the tempo and the groove guardian. And so like that was more serious move to actually become a musician. I was still playing percussion. So when we arrived in Las Vegas, I was not really good enough to do any gigs on drums yet. So I was studying, taking lessons. But on percussion, I joined a lot of bands, and with Santana and Osibisa and conga drums and bongos got really popular because, different eras. For example, in the early 1970s, no musician in the United States, I believe, knew what a cajon was or a pandero, it was like triangle timpani percussion. And then cangos and bangos. Do you call them bangos because you bang on them? Because no, they're called bongo, conga, tumbadora. So like you have to continuously educate people. They says, man, can you play those big tom toms? Those sound really good. It's like they're called congas. So like so it was an education and playing, and I joined a lot of different bands, rock bands, and it became like I started working a lot as a percussionist. And then actually, while still in high school, I got called to play percussion with Debbie Reynolds. A couple of scenes where it's like come rain or come shine, like bongos 1,000 miles an hour, like Jack Constanza played in Hollywood.
He was the big bongo player. Yeah.
Yes. So Jack was like serious. I mean, fast and so like that kind of thing. So I was actually working, and I got my taste of being in the musicians union at 16. My dad co-signed, and then I was playing percussion, and then people started calling me to play congas and a fusion band over here, and we need a percussionist for a show over there. Meanwhile, I'm studying drum set and playing in high school. Then I started playing in college. And then when I actually was in my second year of college, I auditioned for Lola Falana, and that was my first road gig that I had to quit college. And she dealt, of course, with a lot of dancing. So it was like a dancer world, 5, 6, 7, 8, with a Lester Wilson choreographer that he choreographed Saturday Night Fever. So I knew the language of dancers, and went to like when they're starting to learn their routine, you play it a little slower, and once they get it going, they want it faster. So you actually are in tune with the dancer. So I came from that a lot, and when I started playing, even not necessarily for professional dancers like Debbie Reynolds and Julia Prowse and Lola Falana, Ben Vereen, even though I played a top 40 that had dancers in the crowd, you're very much aware that my job is not to show off my paradiddles, is to make them dancers groove, dance, sweat, buy drinks, and then we have a gig.
Very well said. It's true.
You know what I'm saying? So that's a concept. That's why I tell everybody, what's your purpose? So you're playing drums. So what's your purpose? Because it might be you're playing for a dancing troupe, or you're playing for a drum clinic. So now you're playing for drummers. That purpose changes. You're supposed to educate on technique and this and that. With Chicago is to play those songs that are legendary and hit songs, to play them night after night consistently for the people that come and pay money to listen to the soundtrack of their lives. So, drumming has different purposes. I sit on the drum set, and the first thing I'm doing is, what's my purpose? Why am I sitting on my drum set? Is it to keep this groove, because we're playing a gig with brushes and a stand-up bass player? Make them dance and make the people groove. Even though you're playing jazz standards, it doesn't matter what. Other music is not for dancing, like bebop, it's not for necessarily.
Right.
I've never seen people dance bebop, but swing, yes. But so there's different purpose, and I think we all should ask ourselves that question: what am I sitting on my drum set for? What's my job today? So
yeah, no, that's very well said. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because asking oneself, what is my purpose? What am I doing here? And then sticking to it, and being being consistent for it. Yeah.
Somebody asked, like, do you play the same every night? The same? Goes, well, say there's a good Italian restaurant in Montreal that you have experienced over and over and over, and it has 5-star, and you want to take me there. And the day you take me there, they changed the shit around completely because the chef decided to improvise. Well, that's not it. I mean, you're expecting that hit that is known for. That's why you have 5 stars. That's why you're making the money and you are successful, because you have consistency. And when you take me there, and then I'll take somebody, Aldo turned me on to this restaurant. You got to have the spaghetti carbonara. Oh my God. And when you get there, that's what you get.
Yeah.
And so a hit song for people, when they go to the concerts to hear Chicago, it might vary a little bit, maybe a little faster tempo or a little slower tempo, and maybe the instrumentation now is a little different. But it's basically you have to deliver the hit song that is the soundtrack of people's lives 8 months out of the year.
Yes. Wow.
We all go on the road 8 months out of the year. So it's a matter of discipline, consistency, good attitude, smile. Like if you're playing that song for the very first time in your life, even though it's like, imagine these guys have been around at Chicago. This year's our 55th.
55. Oh, man.
Yeah. So they've been playing those songs for 55 years.
Wow.
So, sometimes, like I know a lot of artists get a little tired, some more than others. Like, for example, I know Santana used to like to change some of the songs around just because he's an artist. Like Robert Lamb does that. He goes, oh, you don't have to play this or that. Why don't you try something different? Because he wants his composition to be infused with some freshness. And sometimes there's a fine line. You don't want to change the song too much. But sometimes, for example, I've seen Sting play Roseanne, which I was a fan of the Police, but I didn't know that the original was a bossa nova. So he has played Roseanne as a bossa nova. And people go, what? He goes, well, that was the original form. Actually, it rocked out later on. They recorded it. But, there's many ways how to play a great song. And that's why with drummers, we actually change the grooves to the great songs. So you can play one song as a ballad, as a double tempo, as a rock, as a bossa nova, as a jazz ballad. A great song is a great song. But on the bottom, but what we do as drummers, we can change the groove. It's still the great song on top. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's important. Like I always preach to the drummers out there, I think one of the three most important words to sum up success as in drums or in the music drumming career is tempos, grooves, and styles. Tempos, you gotta know your tempos. You gotta make sure you play the right tempo of the right song. And when it comes to the concert, that like you rehearsed it, or the right tempo that fits the song the best. And then grooves that feel good, so that song and the artist can shine. And then styles, because the style can change the groove. Like you play a samba, and then let's not do it like that. Let's do it rock. Let's do it more jazzy. Let's forget about all of that. How about like New Orleans brushing style? Okay, so those are all different styles. You still have to make it feel good at the right tempo.
That's right. Yeah. No, and it's important. And those of us who have taken an interest in all those world cultures, because basically you're getting all these influences into the music. I remember once that made me think of a conversation I had when Joe Morello came to Cosa. I had a really long conversation about when he was with Brubeck and touring, because they were touring the world in the late 50s, right? And it would Take Five, and that was huge. The time signatures, how can a jazz piece be such a big hit worldwide? And he's traveling the world, and all of these incredible changes, Blue Rondo, La Turk, and all of that. And then he said something interesting. He said, when we're in India, some of the great artists who were there, they set up a meeting and when they were doing a TV show, so that they could exchange. So I sat there and people were asking me questions, and I'm trying to ask them questions about, their technique, their music. And so there's this big exchange. This is probably back in the late 50s. He's saying there was such a high level of interest in what we were doing, and we were interested in what they were doing because we wanted to fuse this other stuff that was new, and we're having success with it. He says, I had a ball because everybody just wanted to learn, and we were just exchanging. And
yeah, that's it. I love that, because it's as humans, I think humans try to like make everybody so different from each other, but we all bleed the same. We have somehow that what we call the yin and yang, and that's actually the balance for me. if you have too much syncopations and no foundation, even like in Cuban music, Indian music, whatever, you always have to have, like even in Cuban music, you have a rumba, and the quinto player, of course, is improvising with the dancer, and he catches your eye immediately because he's the one that is playing different off things. But there's this guy on the back going gluing the stuff.
Yeah.
And so you got the palitos and you got the clave and you got this foundation, which is the yin, and then you got the yang, the rakataka, praka, boom, 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 boom. But that's nothing without the yang. So like, I've in my travels, I've been to all over the world, and there's always a boom and a pop somewhere. Like people think, oh, that's rock. Boom, pa, boom, pa. I mean, people walk in that rhythm everywhere in the world. And even in Chinese dragon dancers' drums, there's a low drum and a high drum, and you hear boom, boom, ka, goom, ka, goom, ka. And you're in China, you're in India, you're in, all the world, you have to have that balance. So in Africa, this continents, India, China, and Africa, I think were like the nests of rhythm in the world that spread, so it is spread. Africa, it just went north, it went east, it went to Europe, all the way, and then China, the same thing. And even in India, even some of the flamenco early music is found to be by Indian gypsies that came from India. So you got all these cultures absorbing and creating different things. But at the bottom line is all that movement of when you're walking, boom, at, boom, cat, boom. That's why, as 120 is probably one of the most popular tempos, because, people practice that every day, walk in certain tempos, and you got that boom, ka, boom, boom, high, low, sweet. Again, any cooking class, the secret is sweet and salty. You got like the salt over here, and then you got the marmalade, you got the butter on the toast and the jam, you got the coffee and the sugar. So that balance, I find also in music. If there's a busy bass player, I play less. If the bass player is simple and gives me a lot of room, then maybe I can express myself because I have the space. When we practice drum in our room, we have 100% of the space. Now enters the bass player, keyboard player. With Chicago, there's 10 of us. So you got to share the space. You
Right.
can't play as much as you play on your practicing room alone, taking all the space. So that whole thing of learning the balance of music, it takes a long time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's a lifelong journey, and it's interesting because, I mean, as long as we think there's more to learn, then we learn more, right? And
Absolutely.
we just keep learning. I mean, I remember when I first started going to Cuba a lot, and realizing when I was facilitating that sometimes they couldn't, in Cuba, as great as those masters are, including Changuito, sometimes they couldn't express to you, or to us, I should say, to you, when I mean those of us from this side, exactly what you're asking, or exactly what is it that you want to know, or what I'm trying to tell you. If you don't have the prerequisite listening history, you will not understand. So then, that's why I wrote the book. I said I've been not answering the question, but interpreting the answer to the question, because first I had to understand what is actually the question that they will understand, and then transmit it back in such a way that I'm being true to the subject, but also because I've studied cultural context, and I'm really interested in this, and ethnomusicology, and how would that translate in our context, in our frame of mind. So this going back and forth, I said, I have to write a book to bring it down to not basic, but to a level where you give it a foundation, but the proper one coming from them that we understand. That led me to writing that book of Cuban rhythms for
And I'll
percussion
tell
and
you,
drum set.
that's a deep book. That book is so deep that every time I go up there to my studio, and I have my books, and sometimes I don't even touch books because I got other things and recording and this and that, and I open it up, I find like something new. It's amazing, like the some people get like overwhelmed with a lot of the different rhythms of the world and all that, but I almost like I almost group uh, different styles of music like in different groups. For example, the 6/8. There's a lot of different 6/8 in Cuba, and then Brazil too, and then in the United States. So basically, they're all related. Reggae 6/8, blues 6/8, shuffle. I mean, it can be like a bata rhythm, So I tend to like group like these are all the 6/8, and you got joropo from Venezuela, Ganawa music from Algeria. They play it's a 6/8, but it's just not the same as say the Ñáñigo 6/8. So I group all my 6/8s in one group, and then all the 16 notes rhythms, samba, 16 notes with rock, which could be each of these rhythms can go into one another really quickly. You can actually do a samba, then put a 2 and 4. Now you got rock. So but that's in the 6/8, the 16 note group. Then there's the 8th group, cha cha cha, and then it goes from there to rock, to bossa nova, and so different varieties. So I think sometimes I try to group them like that. So
interesting, yeah,
because a lot of the students, they get really it becomes like they get scared. They get scared of like, holy cow, I mean, when you open up like the other day, my dad was sending me this book of this Enildo Rasua, and it's even from a professional musician. He goes, I don't have time to get but it's not that complicated if you actually it can be useful, and
right.
because people go, like for example, right now after we finish this conversation, I'm going to go to the supermarket. My first question is, what do I need to buy to cook a meal this week, like dinner, lunch? And there's a million things in the supermarket, but I'm not going to buy a million things. I'm going to only buy what I need. So I think drummers sometimes, I've had conversation with drummers that like have no clue of Cuban music or Latin music, whatever, and they have a great feel, and they're doing what they know because it has worked, not realizing that they need to expand their horizons if they want to work more.
Right.
Because it's not like you're going to wait. Oh, okay, I'm going to wait for the day somebody asks me to record a samba. I don't think that day is going to come. But by learning the syncopations and the rhythms, you're enriching even whatever original band you're working with. Just as a mind expansion on understanding the drum set. So basically, you go like the school of fish. The fish go to the left, to the right. It doesn't matter where the musicians go. Now you can go. And that's what happens by studying, for example, like your book. I mean, even if people don't ever play in a Cuban band, I would actually, it's just like as great and fun, because a lot of books are just exercises. And I take a book like yours, and I actually take a lot of the content as a drum exercise that you can use.
Right. Yep.
There's a big difference, you can practice some rhythms that you can actually apply exactly like that to a groove. And some of them are just exercises, like the baseball player, the boxer, hitting
Right.
hitting he doesn't box like that. He's just exercising or running and then playing soccer. So yeah, you're running as an exercise, and you will use running in the game. But you know, certain exercises, like some of these rhythms, are so syncopated, it's so challenging that it's like an incredible independence, four-way coordination exercises on the drums, even if you're a rock player.
Sure, sure. And also expanding the your physical and mental capacities to do certain things. It's not based on the actual music, but the physical and mental capacity to approach something differently and sound differently. Yeah, just a mental expansion. Yeah.
You know, you've been into world music for such a long time, and I mean, you know, some it's got to be, of course, a love. You know, I just got into it because, you know, in my search, like I think it was, what was it, like Alex album, somebody, the rhythm gatherer, or the collector, the rhythm collector.
All right.
So
Yeah, yeah.
you know, I actually think of myself as that. You know, I love drum sets and everything involved with the drum set, the different snare drums, the different cymbals, the different setups, 2 tom-toms, 10 tom-toms, big bass drum, little bass drum. And then there's the percussion. And percussion is, there's no limit, because right now I'm looking at my kitchen and I can make a really cool groove with all my kitchen knives, the coffee pot, the frying pans. I mean, you know, so with Lindsey Buckingham, for example, when I was working with Lindsey, one time he went in the kitchen to get some coffee and do some toast. And as he was waiting for his toast, he had the knife on his right hand, and he started playing a rhythm with the knife on the kitchen on a metal top. And it was just like the most incredible sound. And he basically went like, I love this sound. So he sampled it. So now I used to play it in the show with my right pedal sampled, because there's no way you can substitute that sound. So like, for a lot of the guys out there that they don't want to expand into electronics and sampling and all that, you know, there's no limit. I mean, you know, sounds of the world controlled by you in a groove that can work for a song. It doesn't necessarily has to be a conga drum or a. Now, with that being said, you know, certain sounds are legit to the style, you know, for example, and that's one of the things that Jeff Porcaro used to say all the time, you know, in his goofy way of, he goes, hey man, you know what? I think there's 2 ways of playing. And I said, really? He goes, yeah, traditionally and kind of like a. And I said, like, kind of like a, you know, we laugh, but it's true. Like, you know, you learn the traditional, say like, okay, what is a cha-cha-cha? Okay, now you learn the cha-cha-cha. It has this instrumentation, these ingredients for the dish. You learn how to play it. You learn the riffs, the feel. And now you can take it and put it into a pop song, or, you know, you can add a 2 and 4 on the snare drum, or instead of the bell, it can be the side stick. So now you're playing a cha-cha-cha, not with the sounds that are traditional, but kind of like a cha-cha-cha.
Right.
And that's what Jeff used to say. He goes, hey man, what is this tune like? He goes, it's kind of like a samba. Kind of like a, you know, but you know, it's really good to learn the traditional, you know, New Orleans music. What is blues? I mean, where did they come from? Like, study the root, then play the fruit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's and I find myself that the more I dig the root, the more fruits come.